Number 10. Ronald McDonald at Greenpeace. Ronald McDonald was arrested at perhaps the last place you would expect, or maybe in the way you would least expect. It all happened when a man dressed up like the character Ronald McDonald and locked himself to the gates of the McDonald's South Auckland Distribution Centre in New Zealand. His real name is Gareth Hughes, but he was decked out in a full Ronald McDonald costume. He was arrested for disorderly conduct, but all he was really doing was protesting chicken. I guess the big guys in the distribution center didn't like the fact that Ronald McDonald had chained himself to the golden arches on their front gate. Why was Gareth protesting chicken? 3 weeks prior to the incident, he became so enraged about how the restaurant chain uses chickens fed on genetically engineered soy that he turned in his registration. This fury ate him up inside until he finally began protesting. He hooked up with Greenpeace activists, some of whom were dressed up like chickens, and they all went to the giant gates of the distribution center. That was when Gareth Hughes, attached himself to the gate with a bicycle lock around his neck. Then they demanded the restaurant chain become genetically engineered free, or GE free. But as you can probably guess, McDonald's didn't give in to the threats. The police came and removed Gareth, and he was hauled off to jail. Number 9. Gunned down in Aldergrove. In Surrey, British Columbia, a man was killed at a McDonald's. He's since been identified as Justin Havishire. His brother has been identified as Corey Havishire, a member of the Red Scorpion gang, who was convicted on 6 counts of first-degree murder. This was for a brutal attack that went down at Surrey's Balmoral Tower in October of 2007. Clearly, Justin's death was no accident. In fact, Justin was connected to the horrifying slaying that happened in 2007. He had helped his brother to burn clothing, get rid of cell phones, and cover up other pieces of evidence. He pleaded guilty to obstruction of justice and spent 20 months in jail. All these years later, he was shot dead while standing outside McDonald's on 56th Avenue and 264th Street. This was around 8 o'clock at night, when the restaurant was busy with customers and filled to the brim with families. A black SUV drove up. Somebody pointed a gun, and they started blasting. According to Sergeant Frank Yang, it was a miracle that nobody inside the restaurant got hurt. Authorities believe it was a high-profile gangster hit, yet they can't figure out an exact motive. In fact, the police haven't even made any arrests. They don't exactly know what happened for Justin to be assassinated or who did it. Apparently in Vancouver, gang warfare is still very much a problem. Number 8. By any means necessary. A woman in Florida has been arrested for threatening McDonald's employees that she'll get sauce by any means necessary. In other words, she was arrested for trying to rob the McDonald's of their dipping sauce. Her name is McGuire Marie McLaughlin, 19 years old. When she visited the McDonald's in Vero Beach, she was shocked to find out their food didn't have any dipping sauce. The nerve! She returned and asked for the dipping sauce, but the employees refused to give it to her. She then said she was going to get it by whatever means necessary, although she didn't actually specify what she meant. It was 4 o'clock in the morning, and the McDonald's employees were in fear of their safety. They called the cops, who showed up to discover McLaughlin screaming profanities through the drive-thru window because she just needed that dipping sauce. For the love of God, give that woman some sauce. Why wouldn't the employees give her the sauce and get rid of her? The answer is because at this particular McDonald's, they were charging 25 cents for the sauce. She didn't want to pay that, and you can't really blame her. But she took it a little too far. The police charged her with disorderly conduct and placed her in mechanical restraints. The police also noted that she was wasted, so that probably had quite a bit to do with it. Number 7. Cleveland's East Side. On Cleveland's East Side, a man was shot and killed at McDonald's. It's even more gruesome than it sounds. The 32-year-old victim was involved in an altercation with the restaurant security guard. The security guard entered the restaurant, began arguing with the 2 men inside, and when things looked like they were going to escalate beyond his control, the guard pulled out his gun. He then shot the victim right in the head, nearly at point-blank range. Death was immediate. The victim didn't even know what happened. 1 second, he was arguing with the security, and the next, everything just went dark. The other guy involved in the altercation was arrested by the police, but the security guard was allowed to go. We don't actually know what the altercation was about, but seeing as it was in the middle of the night, the 2 men inside were probably causing a ruckus, and the security guard just wanted them to leave. But they wanted to stay, and that ended up being the death of one of them. Number 6. Crushed in the drive-thru. A man in Canada became the first person in history to be crushed to death by their own car at a McDonald's drive-thru. Local police called it a tragic death, and there's no doubt it was a bizarre freak accident. Vancouver police confirmed the identity of the deceased as Anthony Isles, a married father of 2 from Maple Ridge. He died on September 8th when he leaned out of his vehicle to pick up something that had fallen out his window. He was trying to pay for his order at the drive-thru window of the McDonald's in downtown Vancouver. As he was leaning out of his open door to pick up whatever he dropped, his vehicle rolled forward. The vehicle hit a structural part of the restaurant. Anthony was unable to get himself free, and he became pinned between his vehicle door and the frame. And it was there that he died, squished against his very own vehicle and unable to get free. By the time the paramedics arrived, he was already dead. It was like if you slammed a full tube of toothpaste in a door. He got all scrambled up on the inside, leaving behind a widow and 2 young kids. Have you ever come close to running yourself over in a restaurant drive-thru? Let us know your harrowing tales in the comments, and don't forget to hit subscribe before the end of the video. Number 5. The 1984 McDonald's slaughter. One of the most terrible things to ever happen at a McDonald's was a horrendous murder rampage in 1984. At approximately 3:40 p.m. on July 18th, James Huberty walked into a McDonald's in San Isidro with a long-barreled Uzi and a pump-action shotgun. He also had a handgun in case he ran out of bullets. The first thing he did was shoot the security guard, and then he turned his attention to everybody else in the store. The shooting lasted for 77 minutes. The terrible massacre continued until a police sniper finally put an end to it with a single shot. The marksman put a bullet straight through James's heart. When the dust had settled and the carnage was over, James and 21 other people were dead. Grandmothers had been killed, a single infant, several children, and the teenage McDonald's employees. Some were dead inside the restaurant. Others lay bleeding to death on the sidewalk out front. Other than the 21 fatalities, there were 19 wounded. This was one of the biggest incidents of the 1980s. The first officer on scene, Police Captain Miguel Rosario, arrived with nothing except his .38 caliber revolver and 6 bullets. He was outmatched and outgunned. Luckily, he managed to hide behind a pickup truck while James Huberty fired armor-piercing rounds at him. Miguel called for the SWAT team, ultimately helping to put an end to the madness. This ended up being one of the reasons police started receiving much better protection in the following years, like better armor and bigger guns. Number 4. Defective soda machine. In the capital of Peru, Lima, 2 workers were killed by a defective soda machine. Carlos Campos and Alexander Peraza, both in their teens, died on December 15th as they were cleaning the fast food restaurant. According to local news outlets, the pair were electrocuted by the defective machine and died on the spot. It happened at the McDonald's in the city's Pueblo Libre district. The workers were just a couple youngsters who had been employed at the restaurant. Their deaths led to all 29 McDonald's locations in the country being shut down while police investigated. The company immediately confirmed that all those soda machines would be taken out of use, but that didn't stop a small group from getting together to stage a protest against the restaurant. The mother of Carlos Campos has accused McDonald's of not training its employees well enough and of general negligence. Here's where things get a little dicey. The managers of the restaurant were already aware that the soda machine was on the fritz, yet no action was ever taken to fix it. When the kids went to do their normal cleaning, they ended up on the wrong side of an electric current and were zapped to their graves. And even though there was a big protest and the McDonald's shut down for a few hours, nothing has really changed. The company that owns the restaurants could face a fine of up to $57,000, but that's not more than a drop in the bucket. It doesn't impact them in any real way. Number 3. McDouble murder. For the 3rd time, we're going to look at a terrifying death that occurred at a McDonald's restaurant in Vancouver. I don't know what it is about this Canadian city, but McDonald's seems to be the most dangerous place you can go. This time, a man named Chang Shi Wang stabbed his ex-wife and her ex-husband to death with a steak knife in front of customers back in August of 2009. Chang pleaded guilty to 2 counts of manslaughter and second-degree murder, earning himself an automatic life sentence. The story behind the double murder is a little complicated. The killer met Yan Lin online several years prior. At the time, she was still living with her ex-husband. The pair had only recently divorced, but Chang and Yan hit it off, and in 2007, they got married in China. Yan sponsored a new husband. He was able to easily move to Canada, and this frustrated Yan's ex-husband. And, by the way, Yan and her ex were still living together, even after she married the new man. Somewhere along the line, things became really awkward. The trio were living together, and after some time passed, Yan and Chang ended their short marriage. And yet, they all continued to live in close proximity. Tensions must have been high, because when all three were at the McDonald's, Wang lost his mind and stabbed them both to death. Number 2. Hostage situation. The manager of a McDonald's in Indianapolis was murdered after he offered himself as a hostage to the people robbing the establishment. His name was Dwayne M. Bible, and he was one of the best managers in history. His employees knew he cared about them, but never could have guessed he would give his life for them. On a Sunday morning, bandits raided his restaurant and demanded a hostage so they could get away from the cops. They tried to take one of the young girls with them, but Dwayne stepped in and said, "No, take me instead." The bandits were heavily armed and were not messing around. The first thing the thieves did was herd all the employees into the back and then stuff them into a walk-in freezer in the basement. The last time anyone saw their manager alive, he was arguing with the armed intruders to at least turn off the power to the freezer so that the girls wouldn't freeze to death. The door and the freezer closed. The bandits had their hostage, and the girls inside could still hear arguing. Seconds later, there were 2 shots, and Dwayne was dead. Nobody knows exactly what happened when the doors closed, but they believe even after Dwayne had given himself up as a hostage, he tried his hardest to get the thieves to turn off the power to the freezer. He didn't want his employees freezing in there in case nobody came to rescue them. It was this boldness and braveness and supreme courage that led to Dwayne being executed right there on the spot. As for the robbers, one was eventually apprehended. Lawrence Gregory Bay was caught and given 280 years for his participation in the slaying. Number 1. The crawl-through window. A woman in Oklahoma City went crazy at McDonald's and tried to crawl through the drive-thru window. Sierra Steed, 20 years old, was arrested on a Tuesday night for public drunkenness and for having an outstanding traffic warrant. But it was really because the McDonald's employees had to call the cops when she tried to enter the restaurant through the window. Here's how it all went down. According to the manager at the McDonald's, she placed her order and then drove right past the first window where she was supposed to pay. When she got to the second window, the employee there said that she hadn't paid for her food. The woman became extremely agitated. She screamed at the employee, claiming she had already paid, and she demanded satisfaction. But she hadn't paid, and so nobody would give her any food. She got so angry that she stepped out of her vehicle and started trying to wiggle her way through the window. She knocked milkshakes off the counter, looking like Gollum from Lord of the Rings trying to crawl through a hole in the wall. She was ultimately defeated and locked out of McDonald's. But rather than being sensible and just driving home, she sat in the parking lot and stewed in her car. She was still there when the police came, who realized she was under the influence of drugs and put her under arrest. Thanks for watching. What's the craziest thing you've ever seen happen at a McDonald's? Let us know about it in the comments below. And for more of the craziest videos on the internet, remember to hit subscribe and check out more stuff from us. See you soon. Bye.